Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is What If Naruto X Tsunade X Harem Part 2. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. Forest in Kawa no Kuni. The 5-unit team continued to tree hop through the forest. Naruto watched his sensei's back, wondering why he hasn't talked to him about the incident yet. He probably isn't talking to me, because it's war, and being heartless to your enemies is a must, he thought as the team dropped to the ground. Okay team, there's a village up ahead. Put away your forehead protectors, just in case there's another Suna team in this village, he said, causing the kids to take the forehead protectors off of their heads. What are you going to do, sensei? You're known throughout the elemental nations, Orochimaru said beside him. Hiruzen looked down at Orochimaru. Don't worry about me, just enjoy yourselves, he said, disappearing in a leafy whirlwind. Enjoy ourselves? What does he mean by that? Jiraiya said as everybody shrugged. Naruto walked ahead. I think I know what he means, he said before he ran with the others following them. The 4 children arrived at the village to see it packed with nothing but people and festival stands. They all looked at the event in amazement. What do you think they're celebrating for? Tsunade asked out loud. Who cares? Naruto said with a smile on his face as he looked at all 3 of his teammates. Let's have fun, he said, running to any fun stand. XXX with Hiruzen XXX. Hiruzen was crouching on a rooftop, overlooking his team. He smiled when they forgot about fighting in this war to have some fun. After watching them run off, he stood to his full height and vanished again. This time he reappeared in an alley. He walked out of the alley and around the festival, on the lookout for his spy. He said he would be where one wins in threes. Where could that be? He thought, looking around. After 20 minutes of just walking around, he noticed a casino. Of course, a casino. He's near the slot machines, he thought, walking in the casino. After browsing for a minute or two, he noticed a man sitting at a slot machine looking nervous. He had black hair, a goatee, and a coin in his hand. He walked by and whispered, "Follow me." After Sarutobi walked by and was gone for a couple of seconds, the man got up and did just that. After 20 minutes of being tailed while walking in the village, the professor exited the village and waited for his tailing spy. Minutes passed by and the man walked into the darkened clearing. He had his left hand in his pocket and his right was flipping the same coin he had at the casino. Nice of you to show up, Lucky, Tsuruboy said, seeing the man. The man was called Lucky because he had this single coin that would always win at slots. But it wasn't just the coin, he was just a lucky guy. The man chuckled. It was kind of difficult to trail you, you know. I guess I'm just lucky enough not to be followed while following you, he said, chuckling one more time. Sarutobi dryly looked at the man as he sort of joked about his lucky skills. Can we get to business? He asked, pushing himself off the tree. Lucky instantly grew serious and stopped flipping his coin. Sure we can, he said as he began to reveal Suna's invasion plans and other secrets. XXX with Naruto 10 minutes later. XXX, currently playing a game of darts, was our time-traveling blonde. He had his last dart in his hand. He looked at the wall in front of him to see 3 more balloons left for him to pop. It didn't matter as he only needed to pop one to get his prize, a little water dragon plushie toy. You got one last dart to go, little boy. Are you ready? The owner of the stand said, smiling at Naruto. Naruto grinned and nodded his head, and looked at the board again. He took a deep breath and threw his dart, and like the other 2, it was a perfect throw that popped the balloon. The bystanders that was watching clapped as Naruto happily jumped up and down. He was handed his plushie toy and he immediately and happily skipped away, clutching his toy to his chest. If any of your teammates see you like this, they wouldn't even recognize you, Kushina commented on her son's behavior. Naruto just shrugged his shoulders. I don't care, I'm too happy, Rai, he was interrupted from thinking as he bumped into somebody. He and his new plushie toy dropped to the ground. Well, would you look at the runt and his little toy? Some 12-year-old bully said, picking up said toy. His other two, 12-year-old friends, laughed at the frown on Naruto's face. Hey, give that back, Naruto said, getting up. Why don't you make me? He said, pushing Naruto. The silvery blonde stumbled back a little before he charged at the kid. He was stopped when the other bullies grabbed his arms. Where do you think you're going? One of the bullies said. Naruto stared as the lead bully walked away laughing at his prize. This will make a great gift for my little sister, he said, laughing some more. Naruto, don't you remember that you're not a regular kid? You can fight them, you know. Kushina said. Realization dawned on Naruto's face. Oh yeah? He thought as he easily ripped his arms free and in seconds dropped the two bullies with simple and fast strikes. The lead bully turned around to call his friends when he noticed they were on the floor, with the little brat not in sight. Hey, how'd you guys get on the floor? He asked, jogging to his friends. One of the dropped bullies groaned. That kid, he's a monster, he said between groans of pain. What? A monster? He's just a little brat, he said. You should not have taken what was mine. The bully heard a voice from behind him. But when he looked behind him, he didn't see anybody, which was strange with the festival going on. Now I have to punish you. This time Naruto was standing right in front of the bully, causing said bully to scream in fear. XXX 10 seconds later XXX. Naruto was, yet again, clutching onto his plushy toy as he skipped along the dirt path. If you looked behind him, you could see the pile of beaten-up bodies of the three bullies. The 6-year-old smiled when he looked at the full moon above. Tonight is such a beautiful night, he muttered. I knew you weren't a regular Gaki, a voice said behind Naruto. Naruto's eyes widened. I didn't even sense him, he thought to himself as he slowly turned his head to see a medium-sized male. And judging from his flak jacket and the headband, he was a Suna Junin. What's a Junin from Suna doing in Kawa no Kuni? He shakily asked, feeling the amount of ki the man was directing toward him. His instincts told him to run, and not to stop, until he found Sensei. Naruto remembered the guy from the history books. He was the famed Kase no Kami. His real name was never known. Even though he only looked to barely be around the age of 18, the blonde was positive about the identity of this man. Naruto knew was that this man was defeated by the Orochimaru after he and his team received their titles. He also knew that he was famous for his ruthlessness in wind techniques and being the first one to properly use shape manipulation to form a dragon's body. Naruto also the man already had his skills, by the small emblem of a wind dragon on the right side of his flak jacket. I don't have to answer you, he simply said, taking a step. As soon as he took a step, Naruto's instincts got tired of being ignored and took control of his body. The blonde then bolted into the nearby forest, his Rinnegan on full blast as he looked for his sensei's chakra signature. Kase smirked as he watched the kid run. Let's begin this little chase, he thought, also running into the forest. Naruto continued pumping his little legs. This is crazy, where the hell is Sensei at? He screamed in his head. The man appeared in front of Naruto, forcing the blonde to drop to the ground below. It's been fun, these last 5 minutes of chasing you, but I've grown bored. You're going to fight me now and I'm not giving you that choice, he said, blurring out of sight. Naruto thought fast, and since he had no idea where the man was going to strike from, he did a technique he learned from one of his father's scrolls. Futon. Tatsumaki no Shoheki. Tornado barrier, he said, rapidly spinning, creating a tornado that repelled the man when he struck. The man bounced back a few meters. You would have expected a frown to wrinkle his face, but a large grin was in place. Excellent, a wind element, like me. And you did a rather unique technique. I bet it was derived from your village's Hyuga clan, no? He said, standing to his feet. At that point Naruto stopped spinning and looked at the man. Just like you told me, I don't have to answer you, he said, activating his Rinnegan. Let's just get this over with. If I'm lucky, I'll defeat you in time to get another toy, he said, glaring at the man. Kaze just grinned at the little threat. He was rather surprised to see that the kid's eyes changed in design. He scoffed in his mind, leaf bastards always getting the good stuff. Naruto quickly bent back, when the Tsunajunin nearly took off his head with another strike. Doing a quick handstand backflip, he went through a series of hand seals. Let's see if this works, Futon, Kazaryu. Wind dragon, he thought, breathing out a wind dragon. Kaze stood shocked at witnessing a technique he created not 2 months ago. He didn't even have time to question the amazement of the technique before he was hit with it. Naruto stared in surprise when his plan actually worked. That actually worked, I can't believe it, he thought. Keep attacking, don't stop your assault. The blonde heard his mother yell. He quickly ran forward, spotting his opponent with his back against a tree. Futon. Kami Oroshi. Diving wind from the mountains, he called out as a swirling vortex collided with Kaze's body, breaking the tree behind it. Naruto jumped into the tree tops and did another set of hand seals. Raiden, Gion. False darkness, he did a lightning technique instead, seeing as he traveled faster than wind. Although the technique traveled fast, Kaze regained his bearings fast enough to escape imminent doom. Naruto looked to his side to see Kaze on the same branch. You're going to tell me how you've completed that technique? A technique I just created, he yelled, moving fast enough to kick Naruto in the side and making him fly through the forest. The Junin didn't even wait until Naruto was a few feet away before he did a sequence of hand seals. Futon. Kazar Yu. He yelled, blowing the dragon straight at the airborne blonde. Currently the blonde's eyes were clenched shut in pain as he flew through the air. He opened them in time to see the dragon a couple feet away from him. He looked behind to see a tree. At that time slowed down, and he moved in slow motion. His eyes focused on the dragon in front and the tree behind at each look. And in a feat of aerobatic, Naruto righted himself in the air and thrust his hands outward. Time returned to normal and the wind dragon in front of Naruto and the approaching tree was destroyed by an invisible force. Naruto was left suspended in air as this was happening. Also, by the look in his eyes, he was unaware about what he was doing. Kaze looked dumbfounded as he witnessed Naruto drop to the forest floor. What the hell was that? He mumbled, still looking at the blonde. Naruto groaned as he rubbed his head. What the hell was that? He mumbled, looking around him, seeing everything pushed outwards. What the hell happened to the forest? He asked, still not understanding what happened. You did Shinra Tensei. Almighty push. You recognize a technique that was used against you, but when you do it, you don't know what the hell happened. Kushina mused in her son's head. The dual-colored genin looked into the treetops, straight at Kaze. If I can do that, then I can definitely defeat this bozo, he mused to himself as he stopped his movement for a couple of seconds. Kaze continued to look at the blonde, still wondering what the hell just happened with the area and how the hell he did that. He continued to think on this when he noticed the blonde stop moving, completely. He rose an eyebrow. Time to end this, he thought, knowing it wasn't a good idea for the blonde to continue whatever it was he was doing. He jumped off the branch, after going through a series of hand seals. Futon. Kaze no Hubby. Wind snake, he blew out his second shape manipulation creation. The snake coursed through the forest, dodging the broken trees and branches. After clearing a way straight to Naruto, the snake opened its maw and crashed into Naruto. Kaze landed on the forest floor the same time the snake collided into the genin. He smirked when he noticed the blonde not put up any kind of defense. That was easier than I thought it would be, he said, crossing his arms and looking at the destruction his snake caused. He was outrightly shocked when, after the dirt cloud cleared, Naruto was standing holding his arm out, without any visual damage to his body. Naruto kept his eyes closed as he took a deep breath. Although his eyes were closed, you could notice that there was a reddish-orange pigmentation around his eyelids. Naruto exhaled his deep breath and opened his eyes, showing a weird, and somewhat, morphed visage of the Rinnegan. With the exception of the pigmentation around the eyes and the horizontal slit of the pupil, nothing else gave away that Naruto had entered Sage mode. I think it's about time I bust this out of storage, Naruto said, leering at Kase. Since I'm sure this is the last round, I would like to know your name. Naruto asked, too busy looking around the forest, not believing the feeling his new set of eyes. Kase nodded as he began to walk towards Naruto. I guess it's only fair to know the man that's going to end your short life. My name is Arashi, and yours? He asked. Naruto's eyes focused on the man, shocking him with the new additions. My name, Naruto said softly, chuckling since, during this time his full name didn't really have any effect. My name is Namikaze Uzumaki Naruto, he said, looking at Arashi's face to see if his name had any apparent effect. It didn't as Arashi uncrossed his arms. Well then, I guess it's time to get this round over with. Right when Naruto dashed at him, he tilted his head in time to avoid a punch, but was surprised when he was flying backwards. What the F? He thought, crashing into a tree. The sage extended his arm towards the rubble. A Rasengan began forming in his left hand. He held that arm with his right to keep it balanced. The ball of spiraling chakra began shrinking to the size of a marble. Rasendangan. Spiral bullet, he said as his right hand continued to keep the left stabilized and dead center, so to speak. With that in the process, he began charging chakra behind the bullet, in preparation to push the bullet. Seconds later he completed the charge and it pushed the spiraling bullet toward the little pile of destroyed forestry, with such speed, a blink of the eye was all it took to travel from Naruto's palm to said pile. You would think that he only made the Rasengan smaller to better hit Arashi through all of the broken tree. But that wasn't a problem at all. Because Naruto, who still retained a semblance of control over the little orb, snapped his fingers and released all of the condensed chakra the little bullet had, just as he released the bullet. And everything after that was a flash of white. XXX back at the village XXX. Hiruzen finished his meeting with his informant. He looked at Jiraiya with a stern gaze. Next time you want to spy on someone, make sure you can't be detected, he said. Jiraiya had the decency to look sheepish. Sorry sensei, I only wanted to see how a meeting like that worked, he said before being hit by Tsunade. You idiot, that spy guy could have killed you, if Hiruzen wasn't there to stop him from acting, she said, scolding him like he was a kid. Oh wait, he is a kid. Orochimaru shook his head. Next time I say stop trying to look for sensei, I suggest you stop trying to look for sensei. Hiruzen looked at the trio. How did you find me in the first place? He asked, curious. Jiraiya shrugged, not having any idea how he found his sensei. I guess I got lucky, he said. Hiruzen just sighed loudly and shook his head. What am I going to do with you for? He asked himself. Wait, for? He asked again, mentally counting heads. Where's Naruto? He asked out loud. A loud explosion was both heard and the top of it was seen a couple of miles just south of their position. I'm guessing he's over there, Orochimaru said, pointing with his thumb. Hiruzen began realizing that ever since his meeting and adopting of Naruto, he's been sighing and shaking his head more than he can count. He was also beginning to wonder if having Naruto on the squad was such a good idea. He was a danger magnet and you did not want a danger magnet during a war. Okay, let's go, he said, running towards the explosion he knew had to do something with his little adoptive brother. XXX destroyed location XXX. Naruto let out a whistle, while on the edge of the crater. Said crater was a 1/4 mile in diameter and 10 feet deep. It would be about the same kind of destruction that his Rasen Shuriken would cause if it dug into the ground. He looked at his left hand in amazement. The results of the new variation of the Rasengan proved to be quite surprising. The initial result was not supposed to be this destructive, well, not on this level. Between the power of both Sage Mode and the Rinnegan, which the latter would be the one that he worked the Rasendangan with, he would have to say that it was too much power at his disposal, and he was the container for the most powerful Biju in the nations. This got him thinking, as he lightly scratched his right temple with his index finger. Maybe absorbing the Kyuubi's chakra made his own chakra more potent, and thus his sage mode. Naruto was knocked out of his thoughts when he heard coughing nearby. He turned and walked towards the sound. "You lived?" Naruto asked, seeing Arashi's body, missing both of his legs. It looks like they were blown off at the kneecaps, with blood still pooling around the limbs. In all my years as a ninja, I'm going to have to agree that this is about the second nastiest thing I've ever seen. The first involves sand and crushing, and I really don't want to remind myself, he thought, rapidly shaking his head. I guess this is the end, huh? Naruto was shaken from his thoughts by Arashi talking to him. As I talk, I can feel the life draining from the man said between coughs of blood. Life, he finally said before the life faded from his eyes. Naruto felt his sage mode release in the middle of the man's little talk, and now that he was dead, his Rinnegan left as well. There's a myth that says, you're not supposed to look into the dying eyes of the man you killed, or his ghost will forever haunt your soul. What a load of bullshit. If he could remember correctly, he and Sasuke retained eye contact in the final moments of their fight. And he didn't remember ever seeing a ghost of Sasuke anywhere. He scoffed as he dropped a kunai next to the man's head, as a tribute to the fight. That was a great fight, Arashi, the Kazon Kami, he said, walking away from the body and back towards the village. It was at that time that his team dropped in front of him. I told you Naruto had something to do with it, Jiraiya said, pointing Naruto. Come on, Jiraiya, everybody knew Naruto did something, Tsunade said, substituting Jiraiya's hit on the head to hit Naruto in the head. That's for going off by yourself to fight somebody. Has anyone ever told you, you're a danger magnet? Orochimaru asked. Of course, every mission I've ever been on was never easy. And always jumped up in a rank or two. That's what happens when you're a danger magnet, Naruto thought, mentally rolling his eyes. Who told you I was a danger magnet? Naruto asked, raising his eyebrow. The three kids pointed at their sensei. What? You are a danger magnet? It's like something in you is telling people to fight you. It's not my fault you're like this, he said, holding up his hands. Whatever, can we get back to the festival? It's over. When you caused that explosion, people panicked, closed their stands and went in their houses, Sarutobi said, crossing his arms. We'll have a talk about what happened later, he added. Naruto's eyes widened a little. Oh yeah, I have a talk scheduled with Mito-san after this is over, he thought. Oh, I guess we have to find a new town to rest at, huh? He asked, folding his arms. Sarutobi nodded. That's right, so we better leave now. We're close enough to Suna's border that they could be here in minutes, he said, motioning for them to follow him as he jumped away. XXX 2 days later, 7 o'clock, XXX. Naruto and his team finally arrived at the gates of Konoha, after making 2 rest stops. They spent the rest of the night and most of the day, resting after Naruto's fight, where Naruto told Hiruzen about his encounter with the Kase no Kami, of course leaving out the Sage Mode part and the Rasendangan part. Sarutobi thought that he wouldn't be able to be surprised anymore, but he was proven wrong. Decisions were made between them and Naruto reluctantly agreed, feeling that it would be better to like this. Naruto looked to his right to see Tsunade and Jiraiya, and to his left was Orochimaru. He took a deep breath and vanished in a shunshin after being cleared by the gate guardians. Sensei, where's Naruto-kun going? He's probably going to train some more. Don't worry about him, we'll see him tomorrow at the team meeting, Jiraiya said. Now that I think about, I have training of my own, he said, giggling before he began walking away. Jiraiya, wait, Naruto isn't going to be at the meeting tomorrow. Decisions were made and he accepted them. After I get back from the Hokage's office, he'll officially be off the team, Hiruzen said, using a body flicker. The Junin appeared in front of the tall red building and walked in. In no time he appeared in front of the door to his sensei. Nice of you to finally arrive, Hiruzen-kun. I received the news you sent me. Instead of preparing for Suna to invade us, I'll select a large group to meet them in Aim no Kuni. Their wheel battle, Tobarama said, getting straight to the point as Hiruzen entered the room. Hiruzen wasn't surprised. His sensei already devised a plan of action to counteract the invasion plan. I met with my spy from Suna and he informed me about some sensitive information about the path they're going to take from Suna through Aim and into Hai no Kuni. Hiruzen said, sitting down. Did he tell you who's going to lead the invasion? Tobarama asked. The Nadaime Cage. Thank you for the information. It would be better if I lead our forces to battle. I'll leave you in charge of the village while I'm gone. Tobarama said, thinking of possible candidates to take with him to the battle. Sensei, you have to take me with you. Hiruzen said. Sure, I'll take you with me. He said, grabbing a piece of paper. I'm getting a very ominous feeling, Sarutobi. I'm appointing you as my successor for the title of Hokage. He said, handing Hiruzen a piece of paper that stated his accusation. I know it'll be difficult, juggling both the Hokage duties and teaching 4 genins, but I'm positive you can do it. I'm honored, Hokage-sensei, but it'll only be 3 students. 3. Why? What happened? I had a talk with Naruto-kun and he and I decided that he would no longer be a part of the team. Hiruzen explained. Why would you kick him off the team? He's sort of a danger magnet, sensei. Oh, I understand what you mean. Tobarama said, nodding. So Naruto-kun is the equivalent Danzo-san. Hiruzen shrugged. I don't think Naruto has any interest in becoming the Hokage. But they do share similarities in acts of ruthlessness. He commented. Really now, how was Naruto brutal in the last mission? Tobarama asked with a raised eyebrow. With the question asked, Hiruzen went the process of explaining what happened through the entirety of the mission. For someone so small and young, he can cause an enormous amount of destruction. Tobarama nodded. I agree. With his Rinnegan and his ocular abilities, he'll become a dangerous shinobi with more training. He said, thinking about what to do now with the little blonde. I know what I'm going to do with the blonde. I have a couple of choices to do with the blonde. Don't worry about him, just worry about your 3 little genins. Tobarama said, dismissing Hiruzen and resuming his paperwork after talking for 2 hours. XXX with Naruto XXX. It's for the better, Naruto. You would have changed the timeline more if you would have stayed with them. Cheer up. You have to get ready for the meeting with Mito-sama. Kushina said, happy that she'll get to see Mito again. I'm not sad about the whole timeline issue, it's just that, they're my friends and I won't be there to help them. But I shouldn't worry about them, just think about who they become. Of course, Orochimaru becomes obsessed with eyes, Tsunade turns into a badass medic that later turns into a drunken gambler, and Jiraiya, well, he's Jiraiya. But they each become the legendary Sannin. Naruto thought, his frown turning into a smile. Alright, so the way to Mito-sama's place is through this forest here. Kushina said, not paying attention to anything Naruto said. Did you hear a word I said? Naruto accused his mother. No, not really. Now hurry up, she said, rushing Naruto. Naruto sighed and made his way towards Mito's house, following Kushina's every direction. After a minute of walking, Naruto stopped. I think you should go silent for a while, he said, cutting off their shared link. He took a deep breath. Silence. He sighed out before he resumed walking. Not long after he resumed walking, he noticed a faint and barely noticeable shimmering on a nearby tree. What could this be? He muttered, walking up to the tree. He examined the shimmering for a couple of seconds. He covered his hand in chakra and touched the shimmer, dispelling the genjutsu. Under the genjutsu was a seal tag that read, barrier. Naruto nodded, finding the basic seal to be obvious. He tried to dispel it by tearing off the tag, but it wasn't budging. Didn't I encounter a tag like this before? He thought. He realized that he had, during the search for Gaara. When the Akatsuki took him to a hideout in River Country, the country he just left. So there must be about 4 more of these things. Hopefully what happened to Super Bushy Brow and his team doesn't happen to me. He thought, putting his fingers in the familiar cross seal, causing 4 puffs of smoke to appear around him. Alright, you 4, each of you look for another tag and await further orders, he commanded, and they disappeared to complete the task. The dual-haired genin leaned against the tree until his Rinnegan was forced on. Boss, I found the main seal. I think you should wait here, the clone said as his Rinnegan showed Naruto a large rock next to an even larger lake. Alright, I know where you're at. Come wait over here. He spoke to his clone through their telepathy, clone link, thingy. He pushed himself off the tree and thought about what just happened. Did I just have a 6 paths of pain moment? I knew I could see through my clone's eyes, but I didn't know if my clone activated his Rinnegan while I didn't have mine activated, that it'll force activation. He thought, contemplating how he could use this to his advantage and disadvantages. He kept his Rinnegan activated as he ran to his clone's previous location. A minute later he landed in front of his destination. Through his own eyes the lake was even more beautiful. He also noticed the same shimmer that was on the tree before. Even with his eyes he couldn't penetrate this genjutsu, which was bewildering. Alright, are each of you ready? He asked his clones, looking at 5 separated tags, in 5 separate locations thanks to his Rinnegan. On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3, he said as they all ripped the tags off at the same time and dispelled themselves. The barrier genjutsu dispelled to reveal a house in the middle of the lake. There was a wooden walkway leading to the door. The house itself was sitting on top of an island big enough to accommodate it and a couple of flower beds. It was 1 story, which was appropriate as it only contained 1 person. He deactivated his dujutsu and walked along the walkway to the house of one of his most powerful ancestors. As he was walking he began to slow down. Why do I feel like I've been through this before? He asked himself before a tornado of water rose up from the lake, going to a total of 30 feet in the air. It began taking form as it moved to surround the house, and as it finished forming, Naruto finally found it to be a dragon. It was a long blue Chinese dragon, with the body being 30 feet long, from what he could estimate. Let's see which one you possess. The dragon growled out as he waited for Naruto's retaliation. Naruto was still shocked at seeing the dragon, only faintly hearing what it said. He studied the dragon in front of him. He knew it wasn't a regular water dragon technique, as those don't talk. So the only logical choice was that it was a summon. Which clarified everything that he had to question about the beast. Wait, which one I possess? He asked as the dragon got tired of waiting and launched forward. Naruto's eyes widened as the dragon came at him quickly. He jumped to the side and the dragon crashed into the walkway, destroying it. The dual-haired genin found himself on top of the water. Damn, I am a danger magnet, he thought, crying anime tears. Despite being on water, Naruto felt it rumble. Listening to his instincts, he jumped in the air. That was a stupid thing to do, as the dragon was still under him. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, Shadow Clone Technique, Naruto said as a clone formed in front of him. Naruto slapped the clone in the back, and used him as a platform to jump to the side. The doppelganger was engulfed by the blue reptile. Naruto landed on the lake and smirked. Katsu, he said as the exploding tag he slapped on the clone exploded. And with the clone, the dragon followed, its head exploded into hundreds of little droplets of water. Naruto looked at the droplets of water suspiciously. It was weird how they just floated there. He began to notice them hardening and sharpening, and that's when the fell fast. The genin dodged the ones he could and used a kunai to deflect the ones he couldn't. Dodging and deflecting was beginning to get tiring. Tatsumaki no Shoheki, he said, spinning as a tornado circled around him. Of course, on top of water a tornado is a hurricane, as the water mixes in with the wind. The hurricane was enough to repel the shards of ice. Naruto stopped spinning when yet again he felt the water rumble. This time he jumped to the side, already in the process of hand seals. Raiden. Gi wait. Naruto said, cutting off the technique. Either the lightning will weaken it, or it'll strengthen it. Can I take that chance? He asked himself, still facing the dragon. How do I defeat this thing? He asked himself, before he had a short flashback to the first time he encountered a guardian like this. That could work. He thought, clearing his throat. Stop. He commanded. When he said this, the dragon quickly coiled around Naruto. Not constricting his body, just surrounding. What did you say? The dragon asked menacingly. Naruto repeated his commanded, waiting for it to be done. The dragon looked at Naruto for a while, before it growled, "Don't tell me what to do." He growled out, preparing to eat Naruto whole. Naruto clenched his eyes and thrust out his arms. Shinra Tensei. The dragon stopped, not because it worked, but because nothing happened. The dragon looked at the Rinnegan-wielding blonde, confused. Did it work? Naruto asked himself, cracking open an eye to see the dragon still there. He opened his eyes fully. What the hell? That's bullshit. He said, not seeing any destruction. I did it once before. He continued to rant about how it was unfair. The dragon kept his reptilian eyes on Naruto, not knowing what to do right now. He watched as the blonde continued to throw his hands everywhere during his rant. Noticing a slight shift in chakra, the dragon engulfed the boy. He opened his mouth, releasing a puff of smoke. He tricked me. It thought, annoyed. Yoo-hoo, Naruto said, waving at the dragon. Not that I'm having fun, but why are you attacking me? He asked, crossing his arms. The dragon scoffed and turned back into water, and returned to the lake. Naruto was left confused and a little ticked off as he deactivated his Rinnegan. "Ah, Naruto-kun, you're so adorable when you're mad," somebody said, pinching Naruto's cheek. Naruto flinched in complete surprise. He turned to see Mito behind him with a smile on her face. I didn't even feel her chakra until she touched me. Naruto thought in surprise. What are you doing here? I live here, Mito said, smiling wider as she pointed to her house. At this, Naruto mentally smacked himself in the head. Wait, why the hell did that dragon attack me? And what did it mean by, which one I possess? Naruto waved his arms around frantically. Whoa, one question at a time. Let's head to the house, while I make you some tea, she said, leading Naruto in the house. Naruto sat on a small couch in a rather large living room. He looked around, and noticed some visible seals on the wall. One looked like a self-projecting genjutsu seal. He didn't know how he knew this, something inside of him told him this. The rest were basic protection seals for the house. He continued to look around the house, until his eyes rested on the table in front of him. It was a prototype for what looked like a gravity seal. Is she making the first gravity seal? It makes sense, since she is a Fuinjutsu master. He thought to himself, noticing the kind of gravity seal she was making. Hey, this is interesting, it's a gravity seal. Something's wrong with it, he said, adding some seals and getting rid of some. There, that's better. A 5-star gravity seal. Each point in the star seal goes to a wrist and an ankle, while the 5th seal goes on the head, most likely the neck somewhere. Finally, the middle of the star, the pentagon, would stay on the torso. This keeps the gravity from just affecting one part of the body and keeps everything equal. Little did Naruto know that he said that out loud. Mito looked at Naruto with surprise all over her face. She had only begun to work on the seal yesterday and he just basically broke down the seal and made it better. Let's see, the design is a little funny looking, Naruto mused, as a triangle on each wrist, ankle, and on the neck with a pentagon on the chest would look weird. Let's see if I can add some kind of cloaking seal with this, he said, analytically looking at the seal in front of him. He dug into his pouch and took out a white and blank scroll. He drew his new design on the scroll. He drew it twice, what it'll look like sealed and unseal. The sealed version would be each triangle on his wrists, ankles, neck, and the pentagon on his chest. Each triangle would contain the same number, like for an example 2, the pentagon on the chest would have the same number. The unsealed version would be a plain star on his chest. Damn, I couldn't think of a way to cloak the points. Oh well, you could always wrap some tape around them, he said, still talking to himself. He closed the scroll, dipped his brush in the ink, and wrote, 5-starred gravity seal, and under that he wrote his name. Creator. Uzumaki Naruto. After that he leaned back and rested his head against the cushion of the couch. Finished. I'm going to have to apply this later. It will double, no triple the results of my taijutsu training. The downside, I'll have to apply it in a couple of years, or I'll stunt my growth, he said, still forgetting where he was at. Mito sat on the dining room table, sipping tea as Naruto worked on the seal for the past hour and a half. She was amazed at his skill in fuinjutsu. To be honest, she wasn't that good at his age, she was just beginning to learn how to do a simple storage seal. So you're finally finished, huh? Watching you better my own seal and customizing it to better benefit the user has been amazing, she said, taking another sip of tea. Naruto flinched again at hearing her voice. He turned to see her sipping tea. Of course, my finished design would have distributed the gravity equally throughout the entire body. But yours is good too, she said, finding her cup empty for the third time in the past hour. Why can't I sense you? He said, with the subject frustrating him. Oh, that reminds me, she said, getting up from the table and walking in her room. Naruto just sat there with an annoyed face. She is acting way different than a couple of days ago. It's like, in public she'll act like your regular stick up the hyuga. But around me, she'll act more relaxed. And she still didn't answer my question. He thought, hitting his head on the cushion as he heard the shower turn on. She walked out of her room about 10 minutes later. She was wearing a regular dark red robe and a pair of relaxing slippers. Her long hair was slightly wet and flowed down to the middle of her back. Sorry to keep you waiting, so what did you want to know? She said, sitting on the couch. For some reason Naruto sensed her before she even walked into the room. So he wasn't surprised when she sat down next to him. I wanted to know why I wasn't able to sense you. But now I can, he said, looking at her, lightly blushing. Why can I sense you now? He said. Oh, that's all you wanted to know. It's just something I made about 15 years ago, she said, getting up and going back in her room. That doesn't answer my question, Naruto muttered, watching her leave. Suddenly he couldn't sense her anymore, and yet she was walking back in the living room. See what just happened? It's like your chakra signature vanished completely. She smirked. It's because of these, she said, reaching into her robe to pull out the same seal tags she wore as a hairpiece. These tags are my greatest work. After a certain event, suppressing my chakra became extremely difficult. So I created these. While I have them activated, these tags prevent my chakra from leaking out, she said, sitting down. Then she started scratching her cheek. Well, they don't prevent the leaking, they just help suppress the chakra that did leak, she said, smiling at Naruto's confused face. That's possible, he said, bewildered beyond belief. He then began thinking. I have more questions. Why did I get attacked by that dragon out there? And what did it mean by which one I possessed? I think I've waited long enough for these answers. Okay. You were attacked because that's what he does. He attacks me every chance he gets. He attacked you because you're a stranger. I'm surprised you're not dead. Hey. Naruto childishly prolonged the word. Are you questioning my skills? He said, receiving a smack on the head. No interruptions, she said, smiling. As for the second question, he was speaking about the bonus condition Uzumakis have. I have no idea why I'm explaining this, but Uzumakis have two bloodlines. The rarest of them all being the Rinnegan. I and two others have had the Rinnegan since the Raikudo Sennin. Counting you would be the fourth. The other is our long lifespan, with the conditions being the subject at hand, she said, making sure Naruto was paying attention. He was, so she continued. There's 3 conditions that vary from Uzumaki to Uzumaki. The first being a large reserves of chakra, with this that Uzumaki would most likely be a ninjutsu specialist. The second being an increased amount of stamina, that Uzumaki would become a taijutsu specialist. And the third, you probably already guessed it, would be a highly developed intellect to become a genjutsu specialist with. Is she saying that, because I can't do a simple genjutsu, that I'm not smart? Naruto thought to himself. I learned from watching you fight, that all three conditions coexist within you. You showed that despite your age, you can do various amount of techniques and have a large amount of stamina. Though I haven't seen you do a single genjutsu, that high intellect is still there, she said, smiling at the genin. She chuckled when he seemed to faint for a short second. Now it's my turn for a question, she said. If you're an Uzumaki, why aren't you in Uzushiogakure with the rest of the Uzumakis? She said, surprising Naruto with her question. Naruto kept the surprise from reaching his face. Why do you question my lineage? He said, activating his Rinnegan. Shouldn't this be enough? He asked, deactivating it. She would be lying if she said she was surprised. I already knew about your Rinnegan. I questioned your lineage because Uzumakis have traits. You only follow a couple of those traits. Give me some traits then. Naruto said, resting his head on the cushion. Uzumakis have red hair. I get my hair from my father. He said quickly. Your father has silver hair, with blonde streaks. Mito asked with a raised eyebrow. I don't know, I'm a natural blonde. I don't know why my hair's changing. He answered. Mito nodded and thought of other traits. Uzumakis have a long lifespan. I'm 6. Uzumakis are honorable. And I'm not. Naruto asked with a tick mark on his forehead. Uzumakis rarely contain their anger. If only you knew how hard it is to contain said anger. He thought. It's hard to contain my anger. Uzumakis your age don't have that much chakra. Mito said. I'm a special child. Uzumakis don't have whisker marks. She said, crossing her arms. I don't have whisker marks. He said, touching one of his cheeks. Where's your bathroom at? He asked. She raised an eyebrow. First door on the right. Naruto ran in the bathroom, turned on the light and looked in the mirror. Like she said, 6 whisker marks, 3 on each cheek. These fully came back. He thought, looking at his cheeks to see the same whisker marks he had all his life. He looked up at his hair to see the silver coloring. And my hair, it's nearly all silver. A couple of days ago it was almost all blonde. He complained. He checked his nails to see that they were slightly longer than normal. And his canines were also slightly longer. His eyes were still electric blue and his pupils were unslitted. He gave a sigh in relief when he noticed that walking around with slitted pupils would raise questions he didn't have the answers to. Does this have to do with the fox? He suddenly thought. Did I really absorb all of its chakra? He asked himself. He lifted his shirt up and molded some of his chakra. Like always, the seal appeared. But the weird thing was that it was glowing red. Now what's happening? He asked. Naruto-kun, what's happening? Naruto heard his mother yell in his mind. It was like an earthquake was happening. I don't know, I think the Kyuubi is returning. He said, letting his shirt fall when Mito's scent got closer. It's like I'm becoming a fox. He thought while mentally crying anime tears. Naruto-kun, is everything alright? Mito asked. Fight. Something whispered in Naruto's head. Naruto shook his head. Yes, everything's alright. Let's get back to the living room. I still have questions. He said as she nodded and turned around. Naruto stayed for a second, before looking at the mirror and seen a flash image of the Kyuubi on top of his. Come on, Naruto-kun. He heard Mito yell from the living room. Naruto turned the lights off and walked out of the bathroom. Mito, why didn't you seek me out a year, if these things concerned you? Naruto asked, crossing his arms. The surprise was visible on Mito's face. She looked down and thought. The Kyuubi. Now it was Naruto's turn to be surprised. He was grateful she was still looking down. What does Nine Tails have to do with this? He asked. Don't act stupid. A year ago the Kyuubi began acting up, which was surprising. Since the seal I used to contain him with should have had him unable to do anything but breathe, she said, her blue eyes now looking at him. It entered my dreams around that time and it said one name, Naruto. It later came to my knowledge that a kid was found just a couple days before. So I kept my eye on you, watching your training, your fighting, your every actions. This is starting to get creepy. Naruto thought as the creepy feelings showed on his face. After the first few months, I realized that you had the Rinnegan. But other than that, I thought you were a regular, but special Uzumaki child, due to the Rinnegan, she added. I would always keep my distance when watching you. I watched you interact and train with your friends. It was only recently that I decided to make contact with you, a week ago, she said as the atmosphere around them grew more thick. That's around the time my hair started changing. Naruto thought out of nowhere. When I grabbed your collar, the Kyuubi contacted me again. The contacts have been getting more frequent the longer I watched you. But this time he said way more than your name. XXX flashback XXX. Mito stood in a darkened alley, waiting for her target to appear. She felt his chakra began moving from his position at the dango shop, and move it did, fast. She wasn't surprised he could move that fast after the amount of training he went through. Her moment came when Naruto zoomed by her, only to be stopped by her hand grabbing his collar. Suddenly she was transported to her mindscape. The world is too big for the both of us, there can be only one, Naruto, the Kyuubi said from all around her before she was brought back to reality, to just notice Naruto looking at her seal tags. I see you have an interest in Fuinjutsu. XXX end flashback XXX. Mito looked at Naruto. After that I had a little friend of mine follow you on your mission, she said pointing to the spot by Naruto's head. The blonde was confused and turned his head. He didn't see anything there, but he noticed there was a slight distortion in the area. He was surprised to see a chameleon appear. Its eyes already had sort of a ripple effect in them, but what shouldn't have been surprising was the light purple coloring. So you had this thing follow me, using the Rinnegan's connected vision ability to keep an eye on me. Naruto stated rather than questioned. Mito nodded. If our fate is to fight for the power of the Kyuubi, then I'm going to have to research on my opponent. I can't have the beast fall into the wrong hands, she said leaning back into the cushion of the couch. When do you want to have the fight? Naruto asked heading towards the door. We'll have it when you're older. Can't be arrested for nearly killing a 6-year-old, she said chuckling clearly aware of her power. The silver-haired child laughed. Sure we'll see, he said walking out the door. I'm sure by the time we have our fight, my strength will grow immensely, he thought disappearing in a whirlwind of leaves, finally heading home. XXX Omake back home XXX. Naruto appeared in front of his big brother's residence. Home, he said running in the house. I'm so hungry, he said running into the kitchen after his stomach growled. Where's my ramen at? He said looking in the cabinet. No, he screamed when he just seen a wrapping of one of his instant cups. Where's it at? He said as his stomach growled again. As Hiruzen walked in the house, he ran to the man and grabbed his pants. Feed me, he yelled. Ah, get off me, he said pushing Naruto off of him. And plus you can cook. But you're better, he said. Hiruzen chuckled. Flattery will get you nowhere, he said as his stomach growled. Naruto smirked, loving the sound of his rumbling stomach. See now you have to feed me. Hiruzen scoffed and walked into the kitchen. You're lucky I'm hungry too, he said as he begun to cook. Currently the silver-haired warrior was inside of his mindscape. He was having another training session with his mother. But this spar was different than the others, it was the last. He wore black cargo pants and a dark green shirt. He wore his black-clothed headband around his waist like a belt. The metal plate was held right in front of the pants acting much like a belt buckle. His silver hair had grown to reach the middle of his back. But you could still see some streaks of yellow in random places in the hair. Fortunately his eyes remained their original electric blue color. You would easily be able to see the blue eyes if they were currently that color. At the moment they were a very light purple, borderlining on gray, with a ripple effect design. The color of his bloodline, the Rinnegan. I can't believe that is going to be the last time we see each other, Ka-san. It seems like it was only yesterday when we first met. Which reminds me, there are some questions you have yet to answer, he said, eyeing his mother. Across from him was said mother, her eyes resembling his. She wore an old-fashioned kunoichi outfit, excluding the armored shinobi mask. Her outfit was the natural black. She also wore straw sandals and black socks. Her long red hair flowed down her back, much like her son's own silver hair. I know, son, and I will answer those questions before I go. Now is the time we fight, she said as the large field of grass rose higher than the two stealth fighters. After the grass stopped rising, trees started growing. With all the growing going on, the mindscape was soon turned into a prey's nightmare. But which one of these fighters is the real predator? After the mindscape finished its transformation, Naruto rocketed through the tall grass. His Rinnegan told him that the grass around him was filled with chakra. It was his and his mother's jobs to find each other through all of the chakra-riddle forestry. This is nothing, I've done this dozens of times. I'll find her in no time, he thought to himself before jumping out of the tall grass and used his eyes to focus on his mother's moving chakra. Kushina appeared behind Naruto and kicked at his head. The boy ducked under the swipe and quickly grabbed her leg. This is a water clone. Unimportant, but relatively annoying, he thought as his eyes got a good look at the female. You're going to have to try harder than that, Maher, he said, slamming the clone on the branch, making it splinter and nearly break in half. The clone then proceeded to splash back into its liquid form. Naruto stood to his full height, 4 feet and 7 inches. He looked down to see a water bullet heading straight for the branch he was on. Because of the damage it had already sustained, the pressurized water was able to destroy the branch. Luckily, the silver-haired shinobi had already jumped off the branch. While he was in the air, his mother appeared in above him. Shinra Tensei. Almighty push, she said, rocketing the preteen back into the forest floor. Naruto landed in the shrubs, disoriented. He shook his head as he stood up. Oh no, she didn't, he mumbled, looking at the smirking face of his mother. Okay, I got something for that, he said, weaving through a series of hand signs. Let's get rid of this forest first, he said, charging throughout his entire body. After a large amount of heat could be seen shimmering around the boy. Kaden. Arekuruu Jigoku. Raging Inferno, he yelled as a wave of fire erupted all around him, burning the forest to cinders. Thankfully, it took Naruto way more than 5 seconds to execute his fiery technique. By that time, Kushina used a clone to almighty push the flames, while she herself used the added time to use a couple of shunshuns to quickly appear away from the flames. The more techniques he makes, the more dangerous they become, she thought with a frown, thinking of all the mysterious techniques he could use against her. Naruto looked around at his work. Wow, I'm glad I'm in my mind. If I wasn't, this would obviously make a lot of people mad, he said, canceling the flames and taking off on a run. He looked to his right to see a dozen shuriken turning into 100, all of which were heading towards him. His eyes radiated chakra as he outstretched his right arm. Shinra Tensei. The technique did its job and pushed the projectiles away and sent some back to their sender. Let's stop with this guerrilla warfare and get to the real fight, Naruto said, crossing his arms as his bloodline deactivated. No bloodline, no running, no mercy, he said as his pupils turned to slits to show his extreme focus on his target. No mercy, huh, she said, deactivating her own Rinnegan. Interesting. Do you really think you can keep up with me without your Rinnegan? Naruto smirked as he uncrossed his arms. I have a feeling you won't be able to answer my questions after this is over. How about you answer them now, before we get started? He asked her. First off, what's the real reason you're in here? Just like your father, I was also able to insert you with chakra. Your father put only enough to stop you from fully releasing the Kyuubi while using its chakra. She stopped to see him nodded, already knowing that. Well, I put all of my chakra in you. I also put part of my soul inside of you. Part. So you're telling me that you split your soul in two? Naruto questioned with wide eyes. Yes. The other part is inside the Shinigami, along with your father's. I made a deal with the god to allow me to train you. Only when you activated your Rinnegan, she said looking at the artificial sky. And I couldn't have two souls in me, so the Kyuubi made the deal more approachable to the god. She nodded looking at him. So when you go, will the Kyuubi return? He asked. Absolutely. The soul would return, only to have you gain full control, she said disappearing. Naruto looked around, keeping his guard up. How come I didn't activate this bloodline before I came to this time period? Naruto asked out loud. I don't know. I guess realizing that you didn't have any parents to take care of you, didn't cause you enough emotional pain to have it activated, she said appearing behind him and punching right at his spine. She was ultimately surprised when the body exploded. She was launched backward, her clothes nearly burned off in the blast. When did he make that Kage Bunshin Bakua? Shadow clone explosion, she thought a little dizzy from the up-close and personal explosion. I'm glad I didn't overload that clone with a massive amount of charka, like I had previously thought of. Otherwise, I wouldn't be enjoying our last fight together. Naruto said smirking as he rose from beneath the earth. Kushina rolled her eyes at her son's nonchalant and cocky attitude. I guess that's only fair. After all, I wouldn't want our fight to end too soon. Or else you'll think your mother is weak without her bloodline, she said quickly closing their distance and punching him in the gut. Naruto groaned at the punch and was hit another 3 times, each in 3 other spots. Before his mother gave him a final punch to his jaw. Luckily Naruto was able to block the attack and kick his mother in the sternum, making her slide backwards with her feet still planted on the ground. Naruto didn't end there as he appeared in front of her and thrust his palm out. Futon. Gekitai Kyosei. Forced repel, he smirked when the attack sent Kushina flying, literally, across the field. He looked at his hand. The attack he did was an upgraded version of Repusho, Gale Wind Palm, and a more precise version of Shinra Tensei. He used the gravity manipulation he learned to control with a lot of difficulty, while his Rinnegan wasn't activated. It had a lot more power behind the attack, used no hand seals, and was totally unavoidable when used with taijutsu. He looked in the distance at his mother. She was slowly struggling to get out of a small hill. Kushina groaned as she shook her head of any cobwebs. What the hell was that? I don't remember that jutsu being developed, she thought stumbling to get up. I only have about 20 minutes left in here. Fighting my son is only shortening the time, she realized as she sat up. Doden. Doryuden. Earth Dragon Projectile. Kushina looked up to see an earthen dragon spitting mud at her. She moved her head to the side to avoid the first one. For the rest of projectiles, she just kept moving her body out of the way. Naruto watched his mom dodged his projectiles and frowned in annoyance. He cancelled the technique and weaved through more hand seals. Suiden. Suiryuden no Jutsu. Water Dragon Projectile Technique. Water quickly appeared throughout the air and formed a dragon. Kushina watched the dragon being formed and smirked. You think you can hurt me with water? You're sadly mistaken, Sochi, she said going through her own hand seals. Suiden. Heigashi Nami. Fierce wave, she said as the dragon heading towards her went completely around her and went towards Naruto. As it was going towards him, it turned into a giant wave. Naruto looked at the wave in surprise. Damn, I kind of walked into this, he said jumping back continuously. As he was jumping he flew through hand seals as quickly as his fingers let him. Futon. Atsugai. He said as the pressurized wind put a hole in the wave. Naruto just jumped through the hole. Now with the wave out of the way he looked around, but couldn't find his mother. It was then he noticed he was in a genjutsu that altered all of his senses. He didn't even feel it when it took hold, but he was in his own mind and didn't have control over it. He quickly broke it to find himself on his back, with his mother over him with a kunai pointed at his neck. You lose, Naruto-kun. You're still having problems with genjutsu, fix the problem or you're screwed, she said, standing up. Naruto remained on his back. He looked at his mom. You really think I would just let you win? Don't tell me you forgot about my exploding clones, he said, causing his mother to widen her eyes. But instead of an explosion of fire, an explosion of smoke was all that clouded her vision, as her body fell about a couple of inches to the floor. After the smoke cleared, the redhead looked around to see hundreds of identical copies of her silver-haired son. She silently cursed at the doppelgangers. Be careful, mother, I put a couple of exploding clones in this batch. Naruto warned his mother, his voice being projected through all of the clones in the field. Kushina began to sweat in slight fear, before she began smirking. I can get rid of these in a couple of minutes. After that I'll only have about 5 minutes left before I vanish, she thought to herself as she fought her last battle with her son. XXX Naruto age 22 XXX. Naruto was shaken awake from his dream of the past by his best friend and brother in everything but blood, Hatake Tsukumo. Now being a part of history, Naruto had the chance to meet many legends in the flesh. Tsukumo was the best of the best and he was best friends with the man. They first met about a week after his initial removal from Team Tsuruboy, now Team Hokage. Yes, Hiruzen was now Hokage, thanks to that pre-invasion plan a decade ago. Who would have known that AIM also knew about Suna's plan to trek through their territory, and also planned to cut them off? With that, a battle between Suna's Nadaime Kazekage, Tobirama Senju, Konoha's own Nadaime Hokage, and lastly the leader of Omegakure Hanzo of the Salamander. That mask-wearing bastard surprised both of the major village parties. He and his ambush army attacked fast, while he personally went straight towards Tobirama and the Kazekage and begun the battle. You would think, with a common enemy, Tobirama and the Kazekage would work together to dispose of the problem. That was not the case. Instead, Hanzo and the Kazekage realized that with all the water from the rain, Tobirama would be far more dangerous. It was a 2-against-1 fight, with the Hokage being the one. Fortunately, Hiruzen, Homura, Koharu, and Danzo was there to lessen the assault on their last remaining sensei and their Nadaime, respectfully. Hiruzen and Danzo teamed up against the Nadaime Kazekage, while Koharu and Homura faced off against multiple Jonin and Anbu from both Suna and AIM. The fights were said to be epic in size and time. An hour of straight cage-level brawls. Hiruzen and Danzo came out victorious in their fight against the Kazekage. Unfortunately, Danzo suffered massive injuries. His right arm and right eye was ultimately damaged. The arm was severed at his shoulder. The eye was just lucky the forearm took most of the damage. Danzo was lucky that Enma, in his staff form, took off the Kazecage's head, courtesy of Hiruzen. Do you know how hard a staff has to be and how hard you have to swing said staff, to take someone's head off? Well, Hiruzen was glad that he and Enma was the perfect combination for the job. Naruto wasn't told how Tobirama fought with Hanzo. All he knew was that the Nadaime was killed by poison. Strong poison at that, venom to be precise. Venom found in a venom sac of a black salamander. That's obviously where the man got his name from. With the deaths of their leaders, Suna and Konoha retreated to their respective villages. And Hanzo back to rest his body and allow it to heal. That had been the first and last major loss Konoha had ever been dealt. And with the defeat coming from the hands of Hanzo of AIM, the Land of Rain had become the new battleground for every future battle with Sunagakure, and don't even get me started on Iwagakure. Their actions after the fight was to try to send countless spies into both countries to see which one was better to invade. They chose Suna and marched through Ishi no Kuni, to get to Kase no Kuni. Konoha was lucky that Hiruzen was a natural leader. He quickly helped his village out of their despair from losing one of the founders of the village, with the first of his legendary speeches. Ever since that battle, the training regime of every shinobi in Konoha rose through the roof. And that's where we return to Naruto and his everything but blood brother Tsukumo. Naruto, wake up. It's time to move out, he said. Tsukumo attire wasn't all that special as it was just the standard outfit for any jonin. He looked too much like his future son, that Naruto had almost called him Kakashi when they first became Jonins. Taicho, we sighted Tsunade-senpai and the rest of the squad fighting Hanzo. An Anbu member, clad in a black cloak and a cat mask, said at the mouth of the cave the two silver-haired teens were in. Naruto say up against the wall of the cave. What's the status of the entire squad? Never mind, I shouldn't even ask. If what Sarutobi ni told me is true, then Hanzo is one dangerous bastard. Naruto said as he and Tsukumo stood to their feet. Naruto was decked out in a black Anbu-style armor. His standard Anbu tattoo graced his left shoulder. Black gloves covered his hands, gray forearms protectors, black pants and gray shin protectors. His boots were also black. He also had a mesh-style undershirt and his headband was non-existent. It was prohibited to have your headband while on missions outside of Hai no Kuni, which was all the time. In its place was a mask of a wolf, to show his place as the leader in the pack, so to speak. The mask itself was never worn and always hung from his hip. All right, lead the way, Naruto commanded as he and Tsukumo sped out of the cave with the other three Anbu members following. In minutes Naruto and Tsukumo dropped to the ground, right behind their comrades. Suheim, Naruto said, causing the woman to turn around. Naruto-kun, she nearly screamed. She turned back towards Hanzo, who stood on top of his massive salamander. I told you he'll be here. Prepare to have your handed to you. Hanzo looked down at the newcomers. Well, if it isn't the Futogo no Jin Okami. Twin silver wolves, this day just got more interesting. I just named these three Konoha's Densetsu no Sanin and now I get to fight you too. Let's get started, shall we? He said, vanishing from atop his salamander. Tsukumo also vanished. Soon the sounds of fighting filled the air. Meanwhile Naruto checked the remaining three members of the infiltrating squad. They each were wearing Anbu-style armor, but none were actually in the core. Thank Kami, you're still breathing. He told all three. Orochimaru scoffed, of course we're still breathing. We're the legendary Sanin. He said, smiling. Naruto looked at his friend with a straight face. We just became the damn Sanin. Jiraiya said from around Orochimaru's arm. Don't you think you should help Tsukumo-kun? I mean Hanzo is pretty strong. Tsunade said. Naruto shook his head. Tsukumo can handle himself. How'd the hell you get detected during your mission? Naruto said, looking at his squad and seeing them decimating some Chunins. They have a pretty impressive security system. You see this rain? Jiraiya asked, pointing up with a finger. I haven't fully figured it out yet, but I know that 20 minutes after entering, we were surrounded. Jiraiya explained. Naruto nodded, looking at the raindrops that were hitting them. Impressive indeed. He stated, looking towards Tsukumo and Hanzo's fight. The silver-haired teen had just cut into the older man's chest with his white chakra tanto. With that tanto, Tsukumo gained his own personal name. Konoha's Shiro Kiba, White Fang, is what he's called when he and Naruto aren't together. Naruto continued to watch his brother fight the man that killed his Nadaime. He narrowed his eyes in frustration and vanished. Hanzo held his chest in slight pain. The cut wasn't deep, but there was white chakra leaking from it. What the hell did you do to me? He asked. Tsukumo smirked. Wouldn't you like to know? He said as more chakra covered his tanto. Let me show you what I did. He said, swinging the tanto towards the wounded man. Ninpu. Chakura no Yajirashi. Arrows of chakra. 3 arrows launched at Hanzo with incredible speed. Hanzo couldn't dodge the speeding arrows. And because of that he was hit exactly on his wound. He yelled in pain as crouched on a single knee. This is like a homing beacon. He realized, indicating the white chakra on his wound. Tsukumo would have answered back, but was stopped as he witnessed Naruto kicking the man in the side of the head. I was wondering when you were going to join the fight. No lie, that man is crazy strong. He said, looking towards the downed man. I know what you mean. He must have had his full attention on you. Because on the way I was expecting him to grab me out of the air. Naruto said, scratching his head. Maybe your arrows did more damage than you thought. Tsukumo shook his head. No, you know the arrow's damage is only based on the amount of chakra I have on the target, he explained looking at Hanzo. The leader of AIM rose to his feet and felt his mask. Part of it was cracked and he ripped it off in anger. Those bastards. I will kill them, he thought in anger. Naruto watched Hanzo closely. He could see a weird light green mist escaping from the man's mouth, before it was overcome by the rain. That must be what killed Tobirama-sama. We have to be careful now and keep our distance, Naruto said quickly glancing at Tsukumo who nodded. Hanzo was soon found gone from his spot. Where the hell did he go? Tsukumo asked as he was watching him the entire time. Naruto looked back to really find the man gone. He heard a gurgling sound and looked to see Hanzo choking Tsukumo. The man inhaled and everything started moving in slow motion for Naruto. He dashed forward and right when the man was about to exhale venom right in Tsukumo's face, he thrust both of his hands. Futon. Gekitai Suru Suyoi. Intense repel, just like its single-palmed counterpart, Hanzo was launched across the field, but not without one of the attacks hitting the man's elbow, shattering the bone and ripping through the flesh. Tsukumo dropped to the floor, coughing. He reached up and ripped the dismembered arm from around his neck. He looked up at Naruto to thank him when he noticed the look in his eye. It was his Rinnegan and he had only used it when he was at his angriest. Stay out for the rest of the fight, Ni-san. I'll handle the rest. Tsukumo could do nothing but nodded slowly. Naruto looked back at Tsunade. I'm going to avenge your grand uncle, my love, he said just loud enough to be heard by everyone. He turned back and started walking towards Hanzo's location. His walk turned into a jog and his jog, into a sprint. That sprint turned into him vanishing. Tsunade looked back at the location, where Naruto was last seen. Previously, every time she would see him with the Rinnegan it would bring chills up and down her spine. But the sight of it now made her feel relaxed and protected. Don't hold back anything. She thought the obvious. Orochimaru glared at the distance, where he and everyone else could feel Naruto's chakra running wildly. With Hanzo's dropping lower and lower. Trees were being uprooted and flames were spreading, seemingly ignoring the fire. He was angry that he didn't have a bloodline like Naruto's. It's always him. Why is he so special? Why is it that I can never match his power? He thought as he turned his attention to Tsukumo. And even this one. He even surpasses our power. I can tell he wasn't fighting at his full strength. His special Tanto and Naruto's Rinnegan are the most desired things I want and I will have them. I just have to wait. Orochimaru schemed. Sweet Kami, I'm glad he's on our side. Jiraiya said when he seen a massive Shinra Tensei. It was focused downward and made a, just as massive, visible crater in the ground. Everybody nodded their heads, now knowing that with the last attack Hanzo was no more. The entire area was dead silent. The Anbu had quickly disposed of the Chunins and Jonins that were with Hanzo, causing any leftovers to flee back to the village. In the distance Naruto could be seen walking back. A few cuts along his armor, but nothing that couldn't be quickly repaired. The Rinnegan was no longer active and he walked with an air of accomplishment. He had just defeated Hanzo the Salamander. Just like what he suspected, Hanzo couldn't compete with the Rinnegan. That was why Nagato Pain was able to defeat him so easily. It was obvious that a Rinnegan used in anger brings victory to the bearer. Naruto approached the group. Even with the failure of your mission, I guess we can count the death of their leader a success, he said smiling brightly. With AIM finally dealt with, the second ninja war is officially over, he said crossing his arms. Tsukumo and the others shook their head at Naruto's declaration. Taicho, even though the war's over, we can still continue their mission. All we have to do is retrieve information about their defense system, just in case we need to use it against them in the future. One of Naruto's female subordinates said appearing behind Naruto, crouched in a bow. The captain nodded. Yes Usagi, Rabbit. Tsukumo, could you lead the mission? You're just as good a leader as I am, he said walking to and taking Tsunade's hand. Tsukumo sighed at the offer. I would like to return to Kai-chan back at home. She and I have not spent all that time together and I would like to rectify that, he argued. The Anbu captain nodded his head. Yeah, I understand that. But I haven't spent any time with Suheim. Even with the end of the war, I wouldn't be able to have this chance for a long time. I'm still an Anbu captain, remember? Then how about stop being a damn Anbu captain? You knew how the hours were going to be when you joined the damn corps 5 years ago. That's your own fault. Tsukumo responded, crossing his arms. Naruto looked at Tsunade for help. Oh brother. She thought, rolling her eyes. Don't look at me like that. I'm not fighting your battles, she said, putting her hands on her hips. Come on Tsukumo. You're going to go anyway. Just go without me. You can boss around my squad as much as you want, the younger silver-haired Anbu captain offered. What? Usagi couldn't help but yell. 2 more Anbu members dropped next to her. A Kame turtle masked male and a Neko cat masked female. Tempting, Tsukumo mumbled, rubbing his chin, feeling some hairs. Taicho, you can't be serious. Kame said. Yeah, I'm not serious. You can't command my squad. Neko, lead the mission. It's your duty as lieutenant anyway. Naruto caved in. Yada. She cheered, showing why Naruto didn't want her to lead. She was like a little kid stuck in a grown woman's body. Don't worry Taicho, I'll lead this mission flawlessly, she said, disappearing with a shunshin. The other 2 members sighed dreadfully and vanished with their lieutenant. I hate you so much, Naruto said, looking at Tsukumo. Tsukumo smiled. Oh, stop exaggerating, he said, chuckling loudly. Have fun on your date, he said, laughing again as he used a shunshin to begin his journey home. What kind of date is this? Naruto nearly yelled as he glanced at all the dead bodies. A bad one, Jiraiya said, making Tsunade and Naruto glare at him. He nervously chuckled as he quickly removed himself from Orochimaru's help and started walking away. The previous blonde noticed how slow Jiraiya was moving and sighed. You 3 should take it easy for a while. We need to find a place to allow you to rest, he said as he left a clone to properly bury the lost leaf ninja and burn the others. Hanzo already being sealed and ready for transport to the village. Hopefully the medics there could work with what's left. I agree. The sooner we rest up, the sooner I can return home, Tsunade said before looking over at Naruto. You did get Hanzo's body right. I'm thinking if I can find out what made him so poisonous, I can not only devise an antidote but we can put it in our own arsenal. What do you take me for, an inattentive genin? I got the bastard right here, he said, patting his pouch that contained the scroll that contained Hanzo. You keep talking to me like that and you'll wish you were an inattentive genin, Tsunade said, scowling at Naruto. Hey look, it stopped raining, Naruto said, trying to distract her only to find that it indeed had stopped raining. It'll be back tomorrow, Orochimaru said truthfully. Not that I'm trying to interrupt any of you, but we're being followed. Naruto stopped moving, with a thoughtful look on his face as he begun thinking. Wait, doesn't Jiraiya and them meet the AIM orphans around this time? He thought, turning around. You can come out now, Naruto said. A head peeked out from behind a fallen tree. A weird helmet was left down behind the little boy's neck. Orange hair and bright blue eyes. He jogged toward them and held out his hand. Give me your food. Naruto, knowing this was Yahiko, dug into his pouch, not at all surprised about the forceful tone. He took out a scroll that contained food. What about your friends? I have enough for all 3 of you. He smiled, looking in the distance to see the other 2, Konan and Nagato. They each had to be around 7 or 8 years old. They were also wearing identical helmet thingies. Jiraiya walked beside Naruto to get a better look at the 3 children. These children have been following us since the battlefield, he said, crouching down and giving the orange-haired child another piece of bread. Why aren't you at home? A battlefield isn't a place for children. They don't have a home to go to, Jiraiya. They're orphans, Baka, Tsunade said, slapping Jiraiya in the back of the head. We should just put them out of their misery and kill them. That way they wouldn't have to suffer. At that point, the three children stopped eating and started panicking. Why do you have to be so cold-hearted, Tem? We're not going to kill anybody. Naruto said, resisting the urge to launch a fireball at the snake user. So what are your names? Naruto asked, looking at the three children already knowing the answer. I'm Yahiko. The orange-haired boy said. That's Conan, he said, pointing at the blue-haired little girl. And this one is Nagato. What's the matter with them? They can't talk. Jiraiya said. What the hell's wrong with you? They're obviously shy because we're from Konoha. Shinobi from our village probably. Naruto trailed off as he began to think. He looked at Nagato. Nagato, from my time, told me that he activated his Rinnegan before he met the Sannin. So he must have it on now, since he couldn't seem to deactivate it. Naruto thought, gesturing for Nagato to come to him with his finger. Nagato, come here. There's something oddly familiar about you, he said, playing it off perfectly. What's wrong, Naruto? What could be familiar about someone you only just met? Tsunade said from behind Naruto, as Orochimaru just sighed and watched. Before Nagato could decline and speak his mind, Yahiko yelled. Train is to become strong like you. I've heard enough, Orochimaru said, pushing off the tree he was leaning against. I have to go return to my remaining student and tell him the news about the war being over, he said, walking away. Tell Nawaki-kun I said hi, she said before turning to Naruto and smiling brightly at how he saved Nawaki a few weeks ago. But that's another story. Let's just say, their love has grown stronger. If you train us, I'll give you this, Conan said from the side as she took out a origami rose head. She offered it to Tsunade, who smiled at the little girl and took the flower. Sorry, sweetie, but I can't train you. I have to return to the village, she said apologetically. I'll train you kids, Jiraiya said, shocking Tsunade. I have a book to write. This break will be the perfect for me to finish just that, Jiraiya said, smiling as he rubbed Yahiko's head. Who knows? I might even find my child of prophecy, he said, smiling brightly. Naruto looked at Jiraiya, the child of prophecy. Oh yeah, that's me, he thought, smiling. He turned back to Nagato. Show me your eyes, he said, almost in a commanding voice. Everyone stared at Naruto, surprised. They had seen him commanding squads of Anbu, Jonin, Chunin, and even them, but orphan children. Naruto, what's wrong with you? Jiraiya asked before Tsunade could. The Uzumaki ignored him and continued to stare into the child, aware of all of the children's fear. Finally Nagato complied and moved the hair away from his eyes. The Rinnegan was revealed to everyone. The others gasped at seeing the Rinnegan in another person. Naruto lowered his head, his own bangs overshadowing his eyes. He took a deep breath and rose his head. Hi cousin, he said, his own Rinnegan activated. Seals of Forgotten Time Chapter 6. Nagato's face was pure shock, as he looked into the older Uzumaki's eyes. It took him about a minute for his brain to reboot and comprehend what he was just called. Cousin, the young Rinnegan user asked. The silvery-haired captain smiled, the previous tension gone like the wind. It made the kids feel at ease, but still cautious around the captain. Yeah, we're cousins. He then began to think, the longer he stared into his cousin's eyes. You must be holding on to the pain of losing your parents, since your Rinnegan is constantly active, he mused softly. Nagato was once again shocked that this man knew so much about him. First he knew about the death of his parents, and the traumatic event bringing forth the Rinnegan in the first place, and the second being that it's been active since then. How do you know about that? He asked, nearly fearing the answer. Because I know everything. Naruto chuckled, making his eyes flash brightly before they deactivated. Go on, try letting go of your pain and calm your agitated chakra. Naruto instructed, watching the young Uzumaki struggle. It's okay, you'll get it eventually, he said before looking at Jiraiya. Change of plans, pervert. For the last time, I'm not a pervert. Naruto stopped Jiraiya with a dismissive wave of his hand. Yeah, super pervert. Change of plans, I'm going to train the kids. I figured that with that book you want to be writing that training kids would only shorten your free time. Plus you could train yourself. Hanzo was too easy and you should not have had any trouble with him. What? The Gamma Senin yelled, more miffed about the jab to his skills rather than losing 3 children to train. Not all of us are the god of shinobi, you not so righteously took from sensei. Well, I didn't want to always be called a fucking god of war. It makes me sound like a war hawk. Naruto said, standing up to look at Jiraiya agitated. Who cares about that? That name was awesome. Tsunade stood at the side watching as her 2 friends argued about the name her boyfriend is feared by. She felt a tug on her pants leg and looked down to see Conan still there. Are they always like this? Tsunade nodded. Every time we meet up for a mission, she said, shaking her head at the adults still acting like children. But she smiled thinking about children, mostly her little brother. She looked at Naruto lovingly. They had been dating for the past decade and now that the war is over they can finally get married. Naruto told her that he'll propose after the war ends. She wanted to get married nearly a year ago, after he saved Naoki with his Rinnegan powers. She remembered that day when Orochimaru brought her the Shodai's necklace that she had gave to Naoki, the previous day. XXX flashback. 10 months ago XXX. Tsunade was running through the halls of Konoha's hospital. She had just gotten news that her brother had returned from his first mission in critical condition. She didn't understand how he could get into such a state after just leaving for the mission the previous day. It baffled her, but remembering that it was her brother in that state she sped up. She reached her brother's door to see Orochimaru in front of it with his head down. What happened, Orochi-kun? What happened to the rest of your team? She asked, remembering about not hearing anything about the rest of the team. The snake user lowered his head in despair. If only I was stronger. I could have saved them all. I could have saved Naoki, your brother. I wasn't fast enough. I wasn't strong enough. Hearing her proud, and slightly arrogant, teammate talk like that got her blood boiling in anger. She grabbed him by his collar and slammed him against the wall. Don't talk like that. Get your fucking head together. She snarled, resisting the urge to slap him. She let him drop to the floor and watched him dig into his sleeve, wincing in the process. I recovered this from the body, he said, holding the Shodai's necklace, now partially covered in dry blood. The blonde used all of her willpower not to flat out fall to her knees and cry. She did reach down and take the pendant from Orochimaru's hand and let a few tears fall from her face. She hugged the necklace against her chest and steeled her nerves and walked into the room. Doctors inside were scrambling around, doing everything they can to save Naoki. She soon joined the process and increased the chances of survival for her little brother. It was all for naught though, as Naoki's life force continued to drop to dangerous levels. Tears were flowing freely from Tsunade's eyes now, as she continued to try and fail to successfully stabilize her brother. Don't go, Nawa-kun. Please don't leave me here, she continued to say through the process. At the rate Naoki's heart rate and organ usage was dropping, he would be dead within the hour. Just as it seemed that nothing could work to save Naoki. The tired doctors heard yelling. Which room is he in? They were confused as to whose voice that was, but Tsunade watched with tears in her eyes as Naruto stumbled into the room. XXX an hour ago XXX. When Naruto heard about Tsunade's brother from one of his subordinates, he smacked himself in the forehead and sped towards the village. Currently he was deep within Earth Country, doing a reconnaissance mission and an assassination mission of a traitorous diplomat. Luckily or not so luckily for him, Naoki had been injured hours ago. So if he hurried as quick as he could, he would be able to make it in time. He cursed to himself as he left his hyper lieutenant in charge of the mission. How could I forget about the most important thing in this time? I need to hurry, he said, landing on a branch and closing his eyes, remaining perfectly still. He felt the power of nature filling his being. He opened his eyes, showing his horizontal pupils and orange irises. The orange pigment around his eyes also showing. He went a step further and took another deep breath. The horizontal pupil began to stretch vertically, making a plus sign. He smirked when he felt more power envelop his being. Just because he didn't have the Kyuubi's soul and conscience didn't mean that he couldn't use the full power of the Kyuubi. The Nine Tails mode shroud, if it could even be called that anymore, surrounded him and further boosted his power. And with a power boost, usually meant a speed boost. And with that he blasted, both figuratively and literally, off the branch, making a trench along the ground behind him and destroying a couple of trees. He flew through the air going faster than anybody could dream of. His mastery of the wind element allowed him to actually fly through the sky, far better than the middle-aged Tsuchikage. Speaking of the Tsuchikage, I have a feeling I'm going to have to fight him in the future. Naruto said, remembering what happened a few years ago, when the cage of Iwagakure single-handedly defeated a platoon of Jonin and Chunin. With only a couple of jutsus. Dust style if an intentional survivor said. Naruto shook his head and lowered himself to the ground, feeling his power boosts going away. They could only hold for 5 minutes, together like they were. He kept his Sage mode active and only released his hold on his chakra shroud. He didn't know why he kept calling it the Kyuubi's when it was his and all his. He safely landed on a branch and cursed about not actually learning how to do the Hirishin. And speaking of, he was going to start as soon as he got home. The scroll was somewhere in his library. He cursed again when he noticed that he was only just passing the border to the country. Damn, I knew I was deep but not that deep, he muttered as he doubled his speed. XXX now XXX. Naruto stumbled into the hospital room to see Tsunade by her brother's bedside crying and staring at him in sadness. His everything hurt and his chakra was going crazy, as if it was filled with adrenaline. Thank Kami he had so much or he would be in the hospital bed. His hair wasn't its usual straight and shiny look, but it was out of place and filled with sweat. He looked at Nawaki and his Rinnegan immediately flared to life. I can heal him, I just need all the machines unhooked. Tsunade immediately stood up, not in joy, but in anger. Unplug him. That'll only kill him faster. She yelled, getting into his face. Naruto looked into his girlfriend's eyes, that were filled with so much sadness and anger. Tsuhime, trust me. Naruto pleaded softly, caressing her cheek. Tsunade looked into her lover's eyes and seeing his determination. You can heal him? She asked softly. Yes, I can heal him, he said, taking the other cheek in his other hand. And bringing her face closer to his and giving her a loving kiss. I just need to take him outside, he said after ending the kiss. Do trust me, he whispered to her, kissing her another time. She nodded, kissing him again, tears still flowing down her face, knowing that as soon as the machines were gone, her brother would officially die. She buried her face in her lover's chest. Do what he says and unhook my brother, she said, her voice muffled by Naruto's vest. Are you sure, Tsunade-sama? One of the medic nins said, to which she only nodded in Naruto's chest, feeling Naruto continuously stroke her hair. Bring him to the roof of the hospital when you're done, Naruto said as he led Tsunade out the room, knowing she didn't want to see her brother die in front of her eyes. The couple met up with Orochimaru, who had remained where he was in sadness, but with a glimmer of hope from hearing what Naruto said. Maybe, just maybe, Naruto-kun can heal Nawaki-kun. With those special eyes of his, he can easily accomplish that, he thought, noticing the Rinnegan in the silvery-haired captain, his wolf mask hanging from his belt, as clear as day. Naruto continued to escort Tsunade to the roof, now holding her in the bridal position. I don't think you would want to see your brother's death, but you'll rather see his rebirth, Naruto said, kissing the top of her hair. She muttered something that Naruto understood to be a thank you. He walked, noticing that Orochimaru was behind them, knowing that he would be able to apologize to Nawaki pretty soon. The roof was just the right size for what the Anbu captain had in mind. He turned to see the doctors carrying Nawaki's body on the floor, carefully of course. Naruto set Tsunade down and walked towards the body. He could tell that he was nearly dead, and only a couple of seconds away from passing on. He took that time to stand straight and concentrate on one of the most taxing techniques the Rinnegan had to offer. He had seen Nagato do it before, on a much wider scale. So doing it for a single person shouldn't really be that hard. He calmed his chakra and took multiple deep breaths. He formed the ram seal and summoned the king of hell, Geto, purple flames around its enlarged head, and its mouth wide open. A kanji for king on its forehead. Naruto was concentrating so hard on his chakra that it was actually visible to the prospectors, as it was being infused into the king of hell. As more chakra was being fed to the king, its mouth started glowing a light green. Geto. Rinne Tensai no Jutsu. Outer Path. Samsara of Heavenly Life Technique, Naruto said, forming a snake seal. The light chakra shot from the mouth and entered Naoki's body, causing it to twitch from the power behind the shot. When Naoki started to slowly open his eyes, he was immediately hugged by Tsunade. Tsunade Nichan, you saved me. He said slowly and softly, because his organs were just beginning to get back into use again. All Tsunade could do was sob into her brother's little chest. The other doctors were surprised by that. Not only was Naruto able to bring Naoki back to life, but he suffered no repercussions. At that, Naruto started wobbling and crashed onto the roof floor. Tsunade heard Orochimaru yell Naruto's name and looked up to see Naruto on the floor. Naruto-kun, she said, running to him. She put his head into her lap. Are you okay, Koibito? She said, concern dripping from her voice. Naruto slowly opened his eyes. I'm fine, let me just close my eyes. He said, feeling unnaturally weak at the moment. She kissed his forehead, knowing he just need to rest from his chakra exhaustion. She was surprised that he could even get chakra exhaustion, with all the chakra he had. Whatever he used must have been used nearly all of it. She reached for her grandfather's necklace and put it around Naruto's head, feeling that he should have it more. I love you so much, Naruto-kun, she said softly as she kissed his cheek once more. XXX flashback end XXX. Tsunade chuckled, remembering the sad day. Naruto was put into a week-long coma and spent that time with Naoki, who was fully recovering from any of his remaining wounds. Just ended Jiraiya and go write your damn book. Naruto said, pointing to his right. Jiraiya huffed and crossed his arms. Fine, I'll leave. Just know that you haven't seen the last of me. He said, turning and walking away. Take as much time as you want, pervert. Naruto said, as Jiraiya disappeared. He turned his attention back to Nagato and Yahiko that was still in front of him. I'm going to get you three so strong, you'll be able to defeat that pervert one-on-one, easily, he said, showing a big grin. What about you? Conan said, before Tsunade could cover her mouth. Naruto scoffed. Are you kidding? Nobody can beat me, he said, showing an even wider grin. He heard Tsunade clear her throat and chuckled. What? Never mind, she said, grabbing Conan's hand and walking away. Naruto looked at her retreating figure and looked down at the two young boys. Beware of the opposite, was all he said before he chased after her. Yahiko and Nagato stayed there, for a couple more seconds. What do you think he meant by that? Nagato said. Yahiko shrugged his shoulder and they ran to catch up with the others. XXX 7 hours later XXX. Naruto and the group walked past another tree and the three kids were getting tired, again. Naruto-sensei, can we take a break? Conan asked from beside him. Again, we just took a break an hour ago, he complained. Just because they took a break, doesn't mean that they fully rested. They barely rested at all. Not all of us can have your never-ending stamina, Tsunade said with her hands on her hips. But I thought you loved my unlimited stamina, he said with a subtle smirk. Tsunade blushed and she was thankful that the three kids were still kids, and didn't catch what Naruto was implying. She willed the blush away and steeled her glare at him. Do I have to knock some sense into you? She said. Naruto pouted and crossed his arms. Fine. he said as 3 puffs of smoke appeared out of nowhere. A seal-less shadow clone was one of his earlier masterpieces. The 3 clones picked the children up and started walking ahead. Before Naruto could go join the group, Tsunade grabbed his hand. There's no telling when we can have some alone time, now that you have a team to take care of. Let's make this a quickie, she said, deeply kissing him. Naruto, with Tsunade in his arms, entered the hotel. 2 of his previous clones dispelled and told him what he needed to know. He walked up the stairs and knocked on the door, and watched his clone open it and dispel. The 3 AIM orphans were already tucked in, they already had their baths, and Tsunade was also napping in his arms, her clothes dirty and her hair a complete mess. I guess we can stay here for a day or two to fully recharge, Naruto commented to himself as he walked into the bathroom to draw him and Tsunade a bath. Luckily, like any ninja, they had a change of clothing sealed into a scroll. And fortunately said seals weren't lost in their activity. And good thing they were on the soft grassy plains, Fire Country had, whilst not softer than Grass Country's grass, but it was shorter than said country's grass. Naruto then began to think about his life. He had a better, if not war-filled, childhood, and he had the true love of his life. A true brother, in both Hiruzen and Tsukumo. Great friends in Jiraiya and Orochimaru, though he has his moments where Naruto just wants to slap him upside his head. But there's good in him, he was just not over losing 2/3 of his genin team. Even better, the best ramen stand in history, literally, was up and running. And he couldn't wait to get him a bowl. He was drooling just thinking about the first bite into those delicious noodles. Tsuki and his wife Ayane were the best ramen chefs in history. Ayane was like a complete replica to her future daughter, maybe it was because they were the same age. Naruto shrugged his shoulders and relaxed in the tub along with Tsunade, who was now awoken, was now just enjoying Naruto washing her body. She leaned her head back and kissed him lovingly. I do, she said, agreeing to his proposal from before. Naruto smiled and they had a true quickie before getting out of the tub and entering the bed, totally forgetting they had children in the hotel, and wetting the bed with their wet bodies. XXX next day XXX. Naruto awoke to Tsunade's smiling, sleeping face. He kissed her cheek and lifted his head to see the 3 AIM orphans looking at him with blushing faces. Ah! Naruto unmanly shrieked as he dove back into Tsunade's cleavage, causing her to moan, and asked him if he wanted to go again, in a sleepy voice. Naruto blushed, knowing that made the 3 children blush even more. I think that's what they meant by stamina yesterday. Naruto heard Yahiko whisper to one of the others. This made Tsunade wake up fully, when she heard the voices. She turned her head to see the 3 smiling children. Can you give us some privacy? She said, blushing as the 3 children quickly ran to the other room. She watched them close the door and turned her head to look at Naruto, who was still concealing his face in her chest. How come you didn't tell me they were right there? She scolded. Naruto looked up at her, through his bangs, so I guess this is a no, for another round. He asked sheepishly as he begun to lick the top of her. That's exactly what it means, she said kind of loudly, before she grabbed his face and kissed him on his lips. Just not now, she said, whispering when she broke the kiss off. Naruto smiled and looked at the door to the room, to see it cracked, and 6 eyes looking inside. His eyes flashed light gray for a second, before he stretched his arm, Bansho Tenin. All creation attraction, the door immediately closed, causing the 3 children to shriek in surprise. Tsunade watched Naruto smirk triumphantly and lightly slapped him on his chest. That wasn't necessary, she chided as she got up from the bed and looked around for her clothes, well, the scroll that contained a new pair. Naruto watched her walked around, the sheet not doing a good job in hiding her plump behind. I love you, Suheim, Naruto said, sighing loudly. She smiled at him and picked up her scroll and moved to the bathroom to get dressed. Naruto smiled at the closed door, before he spotted his vest and used Bansho Tenin to pull it to him. I'm not abusing this technique at all. he told himself with a smile as he turned the vest inside out. A seal was visible that held his clothes scroll and a couple of extra supplies. A transporter for his mask being one of them. The transporter was a blank mask itself and could only be used once, which was a good thing, because he left his mask in the forest somewhere. Which was stupid of him, of course. He placed the mask on his face and channeled chakra into it and his mask's design she.